Welcome to this episode of CP Conversations in celebration of Global Accessibility Awareness Day, the third Thursday in May. I'm talking to Mary Fashik, a Lebanese-born Miami native who currently resides in Georgia. She is the founder of Upgrade Accessibility, a movement designed to challenge accessibility standards while amplifying the voices in the disabled and chronically ill communities. Throughout her various published works, Mary has tackled a wide range of topics, including ableism, the need for more disabled teachers, and disability rights. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. Now, we've got a lot to discuss, so let's dive right in. A lot of your work involves raising awareness about accessibility. How has inaccessibility impacted your life as an adult with cerebral palsy and other chronic illnesses?
I think inaccessibility impacts me every single day. Just the lack of physical access to certain places that claim to be accessible, but really aren't, because it's non-disabled people designing these places and these spaces, and not just physical access, because access to things like more than adequate health care, medical care, and it's just everything goes back to accessibility. As I have learned in my journey, accessibility is all encompassing and not just getting into a physical space.
That's a great point. Can you give us some examples in your life of where you've run into the problem of something not being accessible, whether it's a building or any other example that you have?
Yes, of course. The pre-pandemic, there was an appointment I would go to every week. The building had a ramp. However, the ramp was almost at a 90-degree angle, and the door was heavy, and opening the door outward was very difficult. I hurt my elbow many times trying to get in, and the front wheels of my wheelchair would basically be off of the ground because of how steep that ramp was. And when I complained to the Department of Justice, when I filed a complaint regarding the ADA violation of the ramp, they offered mediation to myself and the owner of the building. However, they said if the owner of the building did not want to do the mediation, then they would close my complaint, and that is exactly what happened. So nothing was done.
Wait a second. So first of all, I want to commend you for filing a complaint, because a lot of people don't even know that that's an option to them, or if they do know, they feel like, oh, why should I take the time? But it's important that you did that. So you filed a complaint and nothing was done.
Absolutely nothing was done. I was offered mediation, but only if the other party accepted the mediation.
Wow. How did that make you feel?
Very unseen, very invisible, which is something the disabled community experiences on a daily basis. That our lives have no value, that this ramp being steep is just an inconvenience, when it's so much more than inconvenience. It is a danger. My chair could tip backwards. I could sustain serious injury.
Right.
And it was just seen as me complaining and being a burden.
That's terrible. And unfortunately, this happens all the time. and you're shedding light on this. And I thank you for that, because you're right. I mean, it's one thing for it to be a ramp that needs to be modified slightly or whatever, but you actually hurt yourself. And that's just not okay. And no matter how you spin it, right? And I'm just so sorry that that happened to you. Now, so a lot of the work, like I said, that you do centers around this because it's obviously a very important issue to you. It, I know that you started Upgrade Accessibility, and from what I was learning about your story, I think it's because another incident happened to you and you were talking to one of your friends, right? Tell us the story. What happened?
So it's actually a very funny story if you think about it. My best friend and I were in our local grocery store, and I went to use the accessible stall. And I use a motorized wheelchair. I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user. Um, and my motorized wheelchair barely fit into the stall. The armrest of my wheelchair was against the door. I barely have room to take 2 steps to transfer on the commode. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, who decided this was accessible? Who said this is an accessible platform? And I came out back when I looked at my best friend. I said, accessibility needs an upgrade. I said, I'm going to start a hashtag. My best friend said, well, you need to make sure that nobody's done that, because hashtags take on very quick and, they're a dime a dozen. And I went home and nobody had a hashtag. So we started with a hashtag. But again, in December of 18, I had an incident where my access needs were denied and I was injured. And I sustained permanent injury because my access needs were not met. So I took that anger from my access needs not being met, and the hashtag became a movement in January of 2019.
I think that that's just a great story, because not only are you speaking about something that is very important and that people need to know about, because if you're not in the community and this issue doesn't affect you, I think most people, they don't even think about it because they don't have to. They're not using aids or they're not using a wheelchair. They're able to just get up and go wherever they want, do whatever they want, and they don't have to think about these things. And here you are, you injured yourself, which that makes me angry, right? For you. And you decided that you were going to do something about it. And I follow you, that we've known each other for a while, and I've been just waiting to have you on. And this is just the perfect time to do that. And before I tell everybody what Global Accessibility Awareness Day is, do you have an example of one of your posts? Because the way you phrase things and the things that you come up with, you really make people think about the issues that are affecting our community.
Yes, I do. I really try to think about a post. When I make a post, I really try to think about putting it into a short amount of words and real small amount of words having the biggest impact. And for it to be, for example, when we talk about the pandemic over the past year. So one of my posts says, being fully vaccinated as a disabled / chronically ill person isn't necessarily the same as being fully vaccinated as a non-disabled / healthy person.
Wow. Yeah, I bet you get a lot of responses to not only that post, but all the things that you write about. And so we are going to talk about how the pandemic has affected you in a little bit. But right now, I want to tell everybody that today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, GAAD for short. And its purpose is to get everyone talking, thinking, and learning about digital access and inclusion and the more than 1 billion people with disabilities and or impairments. So, Mary, what are some of the things that companies and just people in general can do to make their content more accessible?
Well, I think we need to talk about accessibility and digital access and the pandemic. So over the past year, we've seen that things are able to be made accessible. Working from home, Zoom, things like that. And also, companies need to understand that working from home is an option now. However, when all these virtual events started taking place, I think companies neglected to think about closed captions, ASL interpreters, things like on social media, image descriptions. If you are low vision or blind, sometimes you use a screen reader which will read the post for you. But having image descriptions describes the image and what helps the person to know what is on the page. And that also applies for websites as well. They have to be screen reader compatible. And if you have a bunch of garbled mess on your website, it's nearly impossible for a screen reader to be able to guide that person and know where they need to click or anything like or what is actually on the page. So those are just simple things. Image description on social media, captioning your videos. I can't tell you how many news outlets don't caption their videos on social media and big platforms that don't caption their videos. Instagram going back and forth between putting captions and making them available and then taking them away, and just we need to move forward. And I feel like in this day and age, especially in the pandemic, there is no reason for content to not be accessible to everyone.
That's right. You're right. You're right. And is there an app that you would recommend or something just to get people started for is there a simple thing that someone can that I know for me, I've told you I need your help to teach me because I'm kind of like, wait a minute, how do I do all this stuff?
I think if you look around on social media, you can look at for image description, for example, upgrade accessibility. I always do image description.
I know you do, yeah.
And that carries over to my personal account. Mm-hmm. So it's not only, I'm not doing it in a performative way. I'm doing it on my personal
across
account.
The board.
Yes. Facebook as well. Twitter, if I post an image, Twitter has the option of adding alt text. Alt text is where you also describe the image as well.
Okay, that really helps because I noticed that was an option, but I haven't used it yet because I haven't, looked into that to where I actually know what I'm doing, right? But it is something that I'm aware of and that a lot of people are doing now, which is great to see. Now let's switch topics, Mary, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and you talked about mental health in a recent Instagram video. A 2019 study published in Annals of Internal Medicine highlights the need for increased awareness about mental health disorders in adults with cerebral palsy. The study found, among other things, that adults with CP are at an increased risk of experiencing a mental health disorder compared to adults without cerebral palsy. So I'm curious. We've been talking about the pandemic. I know that you have not been out of your house for a year, similar to me, but for very different reasons, your reason and my reason. How has the pandemic affected your mental health as someone who is both chronically ill and disabled?
I would like to comment about the study, if that's okay, that you read.
Absolutely.
I think the study might be a little short. Well, I think they might not have really researched the entire scope of that, because it's not necessarily that cerebral palsy makes you prone
It
to
wasn't
mental.
that, but yeah.
Yeah, like I understand there's a connection, but I think behind that is the ableism that we face as people with cerebral palsy, and all of this, this discrimination that we deal with. And I think that is a big factor of why we might be at increased.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because I know that you're passionate about medical accessibility, and you've told me that your doctors, like you were saying, they always assume that cerebral palsy is the cause of your depression and that your chronic illnesses were ignored for the same reason. So how has that view tainted your experience when seeking help for depression or any other medical issues?
Well, I want to answer your first question, and I'm going to circle back to what you just asked me. Over the course of the past year, it's been very difficult to navigate my mental health. I do have access to a psychologist on a weekly basis. That is a privilege that I have, that I do have access. Now, the level of care, the quality of care I am given by this professional is not the best. I face a lot of ableism from this professional, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. If I don't have these appointments, my mental health will be impacted even more. But sometimes these appointments make me feel worse.
That's terrible. It shouldn't be like that, Mary. I mean, seriously, I watched your Instagram, and you were giving examples of what this person has actually said to you in sessions, and it's shocking.
And I venture to say, if I was not disabled, that they would not be treating me this way. And going back to your second question, for many, many years, I have been chronically ill, but for many, many years, my doctors told me, A, you're just depressed, and that is such a dangerous statement to say you're just depressed. That is not only dismissing my physical health, but it's saying that depression is no big deal, when depression is a very big deal. So I was told that, and I was also told that, like, my chronic illnesses were just assumed to be part of my cerebral palsy. Any of my symptoms were attributed to my cerebral palsy.
That's got to be frustrating because, like I was telling you when we talked the other day, can't you be depressed because you're depressed? I mean, I know for myself, I talk to a therapist as well, every 2 weeks, and he's basically one of the only people that I talk to, like on the phone, or I mean, everything's online, and there's really not for me. I have a lot of connection to people, but not the types of connections that I really need in my life. But the fact that you're getting subpar care, again, it's not rare, unfortunately. That's why we're talking about this. So, what do you think that we can do as a community, and even non-disabled people? How can we get them to be our allies and help us with a lot of the issues that you discuss on a daily basis?
I will tell you, how you asked me that question last week, I think my answer might have been different. But after facilitating a workshop this week, I had a very fundamental, profound moment of thought. And I have said it before, but I really understood the foundation, the problem, the cause of all of it is we need to be seen as people and as a whole person. And we're often not seen as people and individuals as well, because not all disabilities are alike, not all chronic illnesses are alike. So lumping us into one group, that does not help.
It's not accurate and it's not fair.
It's not. So I think what answer to your question is non-disabled people need to realize that we are people. We're people, period. That's a whole sentence.
That's it.
Disabled people are people. And the disregard for disabled and chronically ill individuals, especially over the past year, has been awful. And I don't know if we're going to get to a point where non-disabled people see us as people, because I feel like they often see us as carrying cases, but they want to be nice to us because that makes them feel better. And a lot of times they want disability to be palatable. And I always say my 3 things is disability is messy, disability is political, and disability does not fit in a nice, neat box.
Wow. That's just the perfect place to end it right there, because you gave us food for thought. And I want you to tell us where people can find you if they want to follow what you're doing, because you're doing so many great things. Mary's also the founder of Camp Access, a 6-week virtual camp that fostered community and conversations that are often ignored or are seen as uncomfortable. She's doing a lot, and she's going to tell us, where can people follow you, Mary?
Yes. On Instagram and on Facebook. On Instagram at Upgrade Accessibility. On Facebook, you can find us at Upgrade Accessibility. On Twitter, if you just search for Upgrade Accessibility, it should be the first thing that comes up. And we are preparing for a second year of camp. I'm very excited. And
yay!
That is at camp.access. And that will be in July.
Oh, that's exciting, Mary. And like I always remind everybody who's watching and listening, all that information will be in the show notes. I'll make sure that I get whatever I need from you to be in there if I don't have it already. And people can follow you. And if they want more information on the CP conference, which is coming up in October, they could go to our website and find out about that as well. I just so enjoyed this conversation. You're one smart cookie, let me tell you. You really are. You write beautifully, you make people think, and you use your emotions to put important discussions out there. And you are upgrading not only accessibility, you're upgrading the conversation. So you need to pat yourself on the back for that. And like I said, thank you for being my guest. And I can't wait to see what you're going to be up to next, Mary.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, I loved our conversation. Thank you.